SKYPEanxietycenter.com.
Hi, Jim. It's Carol.
Hello, Carol.
Hello, love. Oh,
Hello.
thank goodness for this new laptop.
Yes, it sounds great. Sounds like you're sitting right beside me.
Yeah, the children surprised me. It's wonderful.
Oh, nice.
I was glad to be back.
It's nice to have you back. How are you doing?
Thank you. I was doing pretty well. The panic feelings seem to have gone considerably. Thank goodness. I still got quite a considerable amount of hyperstimulation. I could feel it. And but the usual stuff worse in the morning, eases off towards the evening. But the GP managed to get me to they found a counsellor for me.
Oh, good.
But and it started off well, in as much as at the first meeting she did listen to everything I've been through and everything I said, which was all right. But then after I explained what had gone on and everything, she just said, "Oh, well, I think after all this time, you're sort of doing it to yourself because you're not letting things go." So, and then scared the life out of me by saying, "If you don't do that, then you'll be in this loop forever. And do you want that?" And like anybody would want that as a thing. So, I thought, well, I'm not sure if this is the right person for me, really. But it was a bit difficult, and because I was trying to explain to her that my body still reacts and triggers. Even like seeing people with the same names and that after what I've been through. And the arguments I'm still having with Auntie Amygdala, by the way, are still, we're still not getting on that well.
Yes, yeah.
But, as we do. But I find I still react to names and triggers. And another thing that, they said is, why are you letting someone who's no longer in your life upset you every day? And I couldn't answer that because I don't know.
Yeah.
And then the second session was pretty much similar. I've only been there twice.
Yeah.
And both times I've sort of come away feeling that I'm doing something wrong. And I felt terrible after the last session because I came away thinking, oh, yeah, I'm crying over someone who, did awful things to my children when they were little. And although the children are adults now and they don't hold me responsible for anything. I mean, we've talked about all of it, and they said it was nothing to do with me. It wasn't my fault. Yeah. And I just came away from both the sessions feeling that I was a bit of a failure and not doing things right. And also the fact that I also feel sometimes like that he's done all this evil stuff, yet he's got the better life.
Yeah. Yeah.
If that makes sense. So the anxiety is still hanging around with the triggers, and she scared me a bit, to be honest, by saying that I'm doing it to myself when I'm working hard on containment and everything else. And and my oldest daughter, as you know, she's been through the anxiety journey with me and has learned a lot from you and reading your materials together like we did and stuff. And she was just saying, she said, I think, Mum, that you didn't ought to go back to this lady because she's obviously not helping you, and just look at these triggers and things like you did the crazy thoughts that Jim helped you with. Yeah. And you know what happened with them when you stopped reacting to them, they went away. But I was conflicted because of her making me feel like I need to be doing something more proactive than I'm doing, and I couldn't want to stay like this forever. Obviously, no one does.
Yeah.
So I'm a bit deflated with that, to be honest.
Oh my, yeah, that's just really bad advice in my opinion. Oh my. The last thing we need to hear is when we're struggling is people tell us, well, get going, if you don't, you're going to be like this forever, the thing that you heard. I mean, that's just totally unhelpful in my opinion. When people have gone through a major life event, we need support, we need compassion, and we need time. These kind of things do resolve, but they resolve in time. It's just like if you went to a doctor and said, I have high hyperstimulation, a doctor says, well, you know what, a couple of weeks you should be good to go, and if you're not, then you're causing this all by yourself. Well, it's unrealistic for the body to respond that fast. Well, the same thing when we come from a major life event. We aren't going to just rebound. What's it been, just over a year or two so far?
It'll be 2 years at the end of March.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a lot of awful court stuff in that period, and
yeah, totally.
Even though there's no contact, because I told her there is virtually no contact, but I'm still getting bombarded with debts and things that I didn't know about, and in flashbacks of because as you know, I worked in mental health all my life, and I find it so hard to think. I think to myself sometimes, did he really do those things?
Yeah.
Am I imagining it? Did he do those things? And then I look at the documents and think, yes, he did. So I'm
Yeah.
sort of bouncing in my head between, why didn't I see it? He
Yeah.
was such a nice person.
Yeah.
He could be really nice.
Yeah.
And then I think, oh, no, actually, he wasn't, because everybody he spoke to, he was lovely. And then he'd come indoors and say awful things about him. So a nice
Yeah.
person doesn't do that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the difficulty. But the thing with
Yeah.
the children, she did upset me a bit when she said that, because I thought, what kind of mother am I then to be crying over a person who actually did that to my children? I should be crying for them, not crying over that person.
Oh my.
But the children understood. They understood immediately. And of course, this counsellor also said, what medications are you on?
Yeah.
And I said, none. I said, none. Because you know my view on that
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
years ago. But,
Yeah.
you know, and she looked astonished at me, as though to say, why not?
Yeah. I know.
And that's a red flag to me already, see?
Yeah. Well, it'd certainly be for me as well. I mean, that was completely unhelpful. Yeah. You're coming up to 2 years in March, so we're almost
Yeah.
2 years. It takes 5 years typically to move beyond a major break. And
Yeah.
depending on the break, it can take longer. And there's times where we can feel more confident in it and it doesn't bother us much. And then there's times it feels we're right back into square one, just like anxiety, right?
Yeah, there is. It is the anxiety. It's almost, to me, like when I mean, obviously the symptoms are similar to when we used to have those discussions about those really bizarre thoughts I had.
Yeah.
And they convinced me, I was terrified of them. They convinced me. And even sometimes they'll pop in now and I feel a bit uncomfortable, but nothing like it was at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But I obviously get the same symptoms when I get images of them together, or
Yeah.
even hear their name. And might be somebody else's who's got the name, but it still triggers me.
Yeah.
And I think, oh God, how am I going to do this? So do I just contain in the same way as is my daughter right? Do I just treat it as though, like when I had all those crazy things going on, do I just do it like that and think that the brain, the fear center will just eventually think, oh, that's nothing anymore?
Regarding the anxious thoughts, yeah, that would be the gist. So just, do your best to ignore them, and, your body's cranked up a little bit. It would be helpful for you to process the loss with someone who's empathetic.
Yeah.
Processing means, for example, sitting in a therapist's office, letting, the client talk about what they've been through, let them vent their emotions, and let them vent as many times as they feel they need to vent. That's how we process. And, for a therapist to think, well, come on, you need to move on here, that's really not helping, because we still have to process it. And it's like, move on, but don't process. That's impossible. So having someone who can listen to you and have you explain to them why you feel the way you do and how you feel about things, and also talk to the therapist about the various things we think about the person. Because sometimes, as you know, the brain we can be talking about certain things that we don't like about the person. The next moment, we also have these fond memories, and sometimes it seems confusing to us. But we do have both. We've lived both, right? Just because we have a bad relationship doesn't mean there were good moments in it. So we have to process that. We have to talk through that. And as we talk through that, and as we vent and express how we're feeling, that's when we move beyond it. Not telling someone to move on, or if you don't, you're going to be in this loop forever, because that's just unhelpful. So
yeah, that's it. Well, I mean, I explained everything. I think within the 2 sessions, I went over all of what happened, the awful stuff, and like you say, that we had some nice times, and it was 27 years and all this, and and she said, well, everyone has breakups. And when I came out, I thought, you're not supposed to come out of a counselling session feeling worse than you went in.
Well, sometimes we can.
I did on both occasions.
Yeah. Well, sometimes we can if we're talking about sensitive things, but in this particular case, I agree with you.
You'd expect that if it was that, but I mean that the way she sort of, I felt belittled, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And I felt when I came out, I thought, well, I'm a 58-year-old woman. I know I've been through this. I know people have breakups all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, but it was, finding out that I was dealing with a covert narcissist who, and I missed it, and I could have spotted it in other people, but I didn't spot it in myself.
Yeah.
And she just didn't seem to get on board. She seemed to think that it's just like a normal breakup.
Yeah.
And she didn't understand the anxiety side of things either, really.
Yeah.
It was like I was explaining to her about hyperstimulation and stuff, and I thought, well, this is not right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally unhelpful, Carol. It's too bad you
Mm,
got that kind of
yeah.
care. I mean, and I don't know, did you have like 2 hours complete, like 1 hour each session?
The first time it was an hour.
Yeah.
The second time was an hour and a half,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
then I thought, well, we're just not really getting anywhere,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I really did feel like I was explaining something, but it was just going right over her head
yeah, totally. Well,
because a lot of the answers were unhelpful, and some of them were not even related to the discussion we were having. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. You said you explained everything in those sessions. Well, 2.5
mm,
hours of explaining is
mm,
nowhere near enough.
no,
It's months
no,
sometimes we have to process this and rehash and talk about it and look at it from different angles and really get those feelings and emotions out. It's a long process, and
yeah,
but I know
yeah.
some therapists think they have to fix the person and help them on their way. Well, that's not really a good therapist in my opinion.
No, no, I don't think I've got another. There is another session booked for the 20 something of this month, but I don't think I will go actually because I really did not feel great when I came out, and it wasn't just because the emotion of what I'd gone through.
Yeah,
It was the feeling of you know being a complete and utter failure and not being able to get over
yeah,
this betrayal, if you like, because it's the rejection and the betrayal. And I tried to explain to her that the sentence that keeps going round in my head was the last thing I was told is that I never said I loved her. We get on well, but she's healthy.
yeah,
And
yeah,
in that sort of thing, it really stuck. It's like a groove in my head, like just like the thoughts are really.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it took my confidence down a bit, and I don't
Sure.
think she knew exactly where I was coming from when I said I just feel completely betrayed, and not to mention the financial side of it with all the
Yeah,
money disappearing, and
yeah,
and of course now he's not paying what he was supposed to pay even through a court order thing, so that's more stress.
yeah,
And he's living he's still living in the town I loved living in, whereby I had to move. He's living in this woman's 4-bedroom house while I'm in a much smaller place.
yeah,
And it's just the unfairness and injustice of it all, I suppose, Jim.
yeah. Totally. On so many levels.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
they don't get it. And, even some friends now are saying, "Oh, blimey, you still holding on to that? Haven't you let go yet?" And
yeah,
I'll say, "Well, you tell me how to, and I will." And then they can't answer me. So,
yeah. A lot of times people who give that kind of advice have never been through a difficult thing, so they just think it's easy,
mm,
or they've been through a thing and they've been able to just move on and that's the end of it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we have a lot invested. I mean, not only the things you've been through in terms of the emotional upset that caused and the financial upset and the ongoing financial upset and struggle that's going on, but also when we go through major life events like that, our self-esteem takes a big hit. Our self-value,
yeah,
how we perceive ourselves, we start
mm,
questioning a lot of parts about ourselves, and all of those need to be worked through in order for us to process and move on.
yeah, yeah.
Yes.
That's
So,
true.
and that's
Yeah, because I mean, in my work, despite having the anxiety previously, even before this happened, I was still in my work and that I still had to be confident and
mhm,
outgoing and everything, and I was fine with that, and I coped with that. But now I feel that even some of my confidence is gone.
yeah, oh, totally. Yeah, yeah. It's
Mm,
understandable. I think a lot of people who go through breakups like that will have their
mm,
confidence, challenged and shaken.
yeah,
And it takes time to rebuild it. It takes time for us to come to a different perspective so we can rebuild it. So,
yeah, and trust. I was always very trusted in, and like you, I'm an empath. Always been an empath.
yeah, yeah. You have a
and
big
and
heart.
it's hard to get out of that sometimes, isn't it? But
Yeah,
I know I will get there. I'm just feeling a bit sorry for myself at the moment because of thinking that am I keeping this going longer than I should,
yeah,
and why do I don't want them in my head, and it's like I used to cry to you and say to you about these thoughts, Jim, get these thoughts out of my head,
yeah,
and that's how I feel like with these, but instead of being a weird thought, it's people, it's
yeah,
a person.
yeah, yeah,
And it
yeah,
just seems so bizarre.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's understandable. Again, there's a lot of reasons for that, and it just takes time to process through. So don't be in a
Yeah.
hurry. Don't put expectations on yourself of having to be through this. When people say you
Mm.
should be through it by now, they just don't understand. That's all.
No, no, that's
Yeah,
right. No, I don't.
yeah.
But you're pretty sure that one day I'll be able to think about it, talk about it, and just
Yep,
say, oh, that was a bad time in my life, and it's
yep,
because my first relationship, I can do that. I looked at a photo of him the other day and I just didn't feel anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I thought, oh gosh, doesn't he look old? He doesn't look well.
Yeah.
You know, and that was it. And then never entered my head again.
Yeah.
But I can't do that with this yet.
Yeah. Do you journal at all, Carol?
I do journal, yes.
Good for you. Okay. Yeah.
I do. Sometimes it's more in depth than others, depending on how I'm feeling at the time.
Yeah, that's good. That's pretty typical. So as long as you're able to vent out how you're feeling, and that's why journals are great, because you can say whatever it is you need to say, and whichever way it needs to be said, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't have even to be correct. We're just venting. But as we vent out and as we clear ourselves of all those feelings and resentments and challenges and thoughts and questions, that's how we process.
Yeah.
So I encourage you.
Does it make me a bad person to be, upset about someone when I know the awful things that person has done, especially to my own sort of biological children? Is that a normal reaction, or is there, am I going a bit? Because I do know he's done some really cruel and awful, evil things. Yeah. So why on earth would anybody miss and cry over someone like that? Because that's what people don't understand. They say, well, look what he's done. Why on earth are you crying over him?
But I'm assuming there's also been times where he's treated you very well.
Yeah, he did, and that's the thing. I think that's the problem with being with a covert narcissist, is as much as when they're nice, they're very nice, and they get under your skin somehow. They get under your skin. Yeah,
well, because they know all the right things to say. They know how to win your favor. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I'm not proud of that. Being so gullible, if you like. I'm not proud of that, but. It's almost like I liken it really to an addiction to a person rather than a drug.
Yeah, but that's it's common for anxious people to get involved with people who are like that, because they do know how to win our favor. They do know how to make us feel good. And when you look at overall anxiety character, we typically struggle with low self-esteem and low self-worth. Yeah. In fact, we're going to be running a poll in the next week or so. It talks about how lovable do you think you are? Well, a lot of us don't think we're lovable at all. And so, so when someone shows us favor and attention, we like that, because it validates us. It boosts our sense of self. And so then we become part of how they treat us. And that's great when they're treating us well. It's awful when they turn against us, because all of a sudden the knives come out and they go right after the places they know they can hurt us the most.
Yeah.
So that's why we get stuck in I missed the person even though he treated me lousy, because we look at there's a combination of the really wonderful things that made us feel good versus the really bad things, and we have a hard time separating from the wonderful things because it means so much to us.
Yeah.
So it's not odd or unusual. It's actually kind of common. It's common for anxious personalities. So.
Yeah.
And not because we're anxious. It's because of how our self-esteem has been hit, right?
They seem to sort of target empaths as well, don't they?
Absolutely. Oh, sure, because they're great manipulators.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Darren, very much.
Oh, you're welcome.
One quick thing I was going to ask you is I can't find your email. It seems to have disappeared from my address book.
Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah.
I thought I just sent you an email recently. Maybe you didn't get it.
No, I didn't get it. I didn't get anything, because I had an interesting article that you might like to see the other day, and I thought, I can't find Jim's email anywhere.
I'm sure I received that, because that's the one I responded to.
Did you? I can't find anything in my. If you got a minute just to send me something so that I can save it, and then I'll have it, because I didn't know if you heard about one of the other ladies who we used to work with a lot with years ago. She passed away, and I was going to say that to you as well. So
I didn't know that.
One of the professors who, back in the early days.
Oh, for heaven's sakes! I will find. Now, your email address hasn't changed, I'm assuming, correct?
No, it should be. I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind at all if it don't come through. I'll message it somehow or with you over the thing. But it should be exactly the same.
Okay, yeah. I'll just respond to it, and I'll watch for it. I'll send it to you when I'm done here.
That's wonderful, Jim. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you for your help, and thank you everybody for listening. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure. And also thank you for sending me these articles you send. I find them very helpful. Even though I may not respond, doesn't mean I don't get them. It's usually my workload is so big.
That's okay. I know that you're interested in some of the ones that I'm interested in. And of course, sometimes over here we get the ones that you don't get, and vice versa, don't we? So.
Yep, absolutely. So I appreciate that.
That's okay, Jim. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. And take your time, Carol. There's no hurry to work through this. We work
No,
through it
no.
as best we can, and it takes as long as it takes, just like anxiety. So just give it some time
Yeah.
and be graceful to yourself.
Yeah, it's just it is a similar thing, isn't it? Really, I suppose that when I think about them, my system just throws out the fear
Yep.
chemicals,
Yep.
and
Yep.
that's why I find difficult. Because I think, well, I'm not afraid of him.
Hmm.
But why am I? But it's similar symptoms to when I was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I presume if it's the same principle, it's almost like my brain has thought it's something to be afraid of rather than something
Yep.
to just cast off.
Yeah. And that'll change too. If
Yeah.
again, here's where working with a good therapist would be able to dig down and to find out why it triggers a fear response. But I'm sure over the course of time you'll see it disappear too, or it might become obvious to you as you ask yourself, so why am I triggering this? What's the threat behind this?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jim.
You're welcome, Carol. Nice to hear from you, by the way.
Yeah, and you, love.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi, I have a question. I'm still eventually gonna try to get a anxiety therapist with your website,
Hmm.
but I know I'm facing some resistance because I feel like my anxiety has kept me safe, or at least that's what I believe. Like, it keeps the sky from falling,
Sure.
and so I know it's gonna be difficult to let go of something. Kind of like people. They're obsessed with losing weight, but the weight keeps them safe. So really, it's
Yeah.
not what they want.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying? I'm afraid to let the anxiety go. And I know I'm going to have to go through it with the therapist, but I'm wondering if you offer any insights about that quickly.
Yeah. Well, that's a common one too, because we, depending on how old we are, we live our entire lives with we believe anxiety keeping us safe, and so the last thing we want to do is throw out our only security blanket because we don't know there's another one, and so we hold on to what we know. But working with a good therapist will help you make a change from what you think you need to do to keep yourself safe to what actually does keep yourself safe without being anxious. So there's a transition. It's a process, and it's not a short one either, because we have to sort of learn new skills. We sort of have to test them to make sure they're going to work, which takes time. We have to build the confidence in the new skills before we let the old security blanket go. So it's a process that takes time, but we can get there. We can learn to keep ourselves safe in healthy ways rather than anxious ways. So that's the good news, but it is work.
Do you have any suggestions about diligence? What motivates diligence? Because, yeah, I tend to give up quickly.
Sure. Well, there's a lot of pieces to that too. Without knowing more specifically about your background, I can only make general comments. But when we come from certain types of backgrounds, they rob our confidence, which places us in a place of learned helplessness. Now, I'll be gentle with that term. What I mean by that is that we get to the place where we don't strive too much, or we give up too quick, and there's reasons why we do that, and they're various depending on the backgrounds we come from. So how does a person move beyond that to actually become successful? Again, it's a process. There's work we have to do to go after those belief systems. We have to learn how to build resilience. We have to learn how to build perseverance. We have to learn to be patient. And through that process, we also have to be developing our sense of self-confidence. That's an area we struggle in quite often, especially when it comes to the area you're talking about stopping, not following through. Our backgrounds play a major role in how that develops. And depending on all the factors that are in there, there's different ways of coming through all that, but we can with the right help. Now, here again, just based on some of the things you mentioned, it's going to require a specific therapist who knows how to get through these things to get to the other side. As I was talking to Carol, the therapist needs to be patient, needs to know how to encourage you forward in helpful yet not overly assertive ways. There has to be small goals set so you can see that you actually are accomplishing it. We have to have a really good analysis of your self-esteem and why you have the self-esteem you do and what those values are to you. So there's a lot of work that needs to go in the background so that you can take the right approach moving forward and find yourself to be successful. It's all doable. It's just work. And unfortunately, that's the challenges of what we deal with when it comes to anxiety and, other mental health things like, depression and some of the others, where they're behavioral issues that we can change. It's just that it takes work to get there, and that work is slow, but we can get there. That's the nice thing. So unfortunately, again, I can't be more specific because there are so many variables that could be discussed, but there's ways that you can accomplish that if you want to succeed, and if you're going to be patient, and this is where the therapist can help you, encourage you along in a patient and empathetic and a compassionate way, you can be successful and move through this.
And there's also family relationships. People may love you, but that doesn't mean they want you to change.
Yep. Relationships are certainly going to play a role. One of the greatest barriers to adopting and applying boundaries is that people don't want them. We're usually in relationships where they're boundary violators, so the last thing they want is for you to put a good boundary in place. And so the resistance will come in the forms of guilt and shame and abandonment and rejection, because they're going to do everything they can to keep you the way they want you to be. But you see, if we don't change, we just struggle, and we struggle year after year after year, and it doesn't improve because we're bound to their unhealthiness. And so that's, one of the reasons we recommend boundaries so much, but also one of the reasons we recommend working with a therapist with boundaries, because as we start applying them, we're going to need some professional support to get us through some of the hurdles and resistance that it comes our way. Because most of us come from unhealthy backgrounds. Rarely do we ever see someone come to us with anxiety disorder who's come from a healthy background. But the truth is that healthy backgrounds are so rare. So we all have kind of the same kind of issues. But when we do the right things and work with the right people and make the right changes, we come out the other side. Yes, we might have to lose some of our relationships as we move forward, because they're just going to be impossible to keep because they're not interested in changing at all. But as we apply boundaries, they're going to withdraw. And sometimes we have to grieve that loss and move on. But you know what? It's way easier to do that than to be stuck in an unhealthy relationship and struggle with anxiety and depression and medication and any other kind of unhealthy coping strategy we can find just to survive. To me, that's not a life. So sometimes we have to let go of what we call the crazy makers in order to succeed. But again, this is where it requires a therapist. Another complication is if a person has been isolated and feels alone and having to apply boundaries with loved ones, because sometimes those loved ones are the only people they have in their lives. And we desire relationships. So for us to apply healthy boundaries against the only relationships we have can be extremely, concerning. So this is where a therapist can help us apply those boundaries and help us find healthier relationships where we can actually flourish. But you see, we need that support as we make that transition. So there's so many things involved. I can't touch them all, but those are just a few.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One thing I want to say as an overall thing is most of us struggle because of low self-esteem, as I mentioned. One really important area to work on to help us move forward be self-esteem issues. And almost always we need help. Because again, we're often our only support network. So we're trying to make headway in a world using our old skills. Well, they don't work that way. So we need someone with professional skills to help us apply them and support us as we make change. So as we adopt those new skills, we become healthier, and then it becomes clearer to us in terms of how we can move ahead. And low self-esteem is one of those ones that just needs an ongoing support. It needs someone to challenge our beliefs about ourselves. And sometimes that can be difficult to hear, because sometimes we don't want to have those beliefs challenged. And sometimes, as you mentioned, those beliefs are the only security blanket we have. So that's the last thing we want to challenge. But if we don't challenge them, we don't move forward. We just remain stuck. So a therapist can help us gently move in the direction of healthy self-esteem. Healthy self-esteem doesn't mean that we're the greatest person on earth. It means we have a healthy appreciation of who we are, including our pluses and minuses, but we're okay with that. It means there might be areas in our life that we're very happy with and we don't want to change. And it could be areas in our lives that we want to change because we'd like to get better, or we'd like to improve, or we'd like to have even better relationships. But having a fair appreciation of who you are, because here's the bottom line. All of us are of equal value. That means that all of us are lovable. Even though we've had maybe years of people saying we're unlovable, or there's something wrong with us, or, why would we be that way, and no one cares for you. we all are lovable. It's just that we have a hard time breaking through the crust of all that hurt to get that love. And oftentimes when we come from anxious backgrounds, we gravitate to unhealthy relationships because we're unhealthy ourselves. Oftentimes the relationships we have in our lives model those of our parents, how we related to our parents or how our parents related to each other. And so that becomes familiar to us. We gravitate to those which are unhealthy, and then we struggle. A lot of times our anxiety comes from those relationships because we're in the wrong matchup. And so in order for us to change that, to get different relationships, we have to change, which means self-evaluation, doing internal work, doing boundaries work, giving a sense of self-esteem, raising that up. But as we do that, we start gravitating to healthy people. And guess what? Next thing you know, we have great relationships. Again, I can only speak from my own experience. Being divorced years ago, totally matched to the wrong person for a lot of different reasons. We struggled for years, could never make it work. Fought, and I became the person I never thought I'd ever become just because we were a mismatch. But after the divorce and I had some time and God started cleaning me up, so to speak, took me out to the desert, so to speak, and cleaned up some of my underlying factors. Then I finally married to Marilyn. We get along great. It's been the greatest relationship I've ever had because we're so compatible. Doesn't mean we don't have disagreements, but our disagreements are managed in healthy ways. And we say different things to ourselves about our relationships and partners. So everything's different. And that's the kind of success people can achieve if they're willing to do the work, willing to self-analyze, willing to say, okay, you know what? I want to do this for me. I want my life experience to be different. And so we work at those things, and a therapist can help you all along the way. Here's another thing about working with a therapist is that we often don't know the areas of our struggle. And as one of the earlier commenters had made, sometimes we don't even know we struggle with anxiety. Sometimes symptoms are the only way we first discover it. And so the therapist can help us see these things clearer and help us build from that harm that we've incurred at a young age, some of the belief systems we had, and move forward in life and really become the person that we feel inside that we want to be. And so that's all attainable, but it is work. And sometimes it's lots of work depending on underlying factors. But we're here and we want to help you succeed because when I look at my lives between now and what it was back then, it's like night and day. I would never want to go back to where I was. Doesn't mean I didn't care for the person I was married to. It's just that we were two unhealthy people struggling to try to make a relationship work, and it just didn't happen. So again, if you're looking at some of the things you talked about, look at self-esteem, investigate it, read about it. Another thing too is read about resilience, which we're going to be talking about quite a bit in the future. Because, life is tough. It's challenging. We're in a decay mode. Things aren't going to be great. And so from an anxious perspective, we want life to be happy, safe, and good. But, that's just not the life experience. We have challenges. We have health issues. As you get older, most people have to deal with health issues. And so we want to build resiliency so that we're not always succumbing to anxiety. So we have a good skill set to get us through the adversities that come. So there's lots of different ways we can move forward from the damage that we experience as a younger age and as we use as adults. So I just encourage you, if you're looking, if you want to succeed, working with a therapist is the best way. So now after that soapbox, does anybody have any questions before we move on?
I do. Jim, this is Renee again. Can I ask you, I love to read, and Amanda's suggested things for me to read. But as you're talking about self-esteem, I know I read the Boundaries book. Mm-hmm. Is there any other books that are encouraging to read, that are beneficial, that steer you down like a road where you feel hope and confident, and even if it's just like some of the best books you've ever read?
Yeah. Well, with self-esteem, I personally had a problem finding a good book. I've sort of pooled my information from a whole series of sources, very few relating to self-esteem, mostly around character development, values and beliefs, and positive psychology and some of those things. Of course, my Christian values play a lot in that as well. For me, I struggled with low self-esteem for years, major people pleaser, hypercritical, and so on and so forth. Well, God cleaned that up by recognizing, God values me as a person. He knows I'm not going to be perfect. He doesn't care. He came and saved me just because of who I am, because of his love for us, in spite of my fallenness and shortcomings and and all those things. And if you look through the Bible, you see how God used all those broken people. None of them were perfect, you know. He used them all because he loves us. And he loves us for who we are. He knows our shortcomings. And all of us have shortcomings. All of us have strengths and all these great things, but we also have things we're not happy about. But that's just a human condition. But it doesn't mean we're not lovable. And just because a parent said, you know, what's wrong with you, or neglected us or rejected us, doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It means there's something wrong with how that parent parented. So we need to put the blame where it belongs. And we need to get rid of the responsibility of thinking there's something wrong with us. So unfortunately, I actually should say this. I've bought another book just recently that I'm just starting to go through. And if it's any good, I'll let you know.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I'm just going to see here. Last year, the therapist put together a list of resources that people might find helpful. I'll do this. Well, let me ask you this. Would it be worthwhile to bring two of our therapists on to talk specifically about self-esteem issues? Would you find that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. Because I'm interested. I hear you talking about that. I don't know per se that that's an issue for me. As you're talking, I'm thinking, that could possibly be. I'd like to hear more about that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, I think what I'd like to do is to bring some of the therapists on so we can have more in-depth conversation. For example, with Carol, as you're working through this, we do have therapists who specialize in grieving process. You might find some of their comments helpful. So we could
I think that'd be a great idea, and also the self-esteem is sort of hand in hand with the confidence issue as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So if we talk more about those things in the weeks ahead, that might be helpful.
Extremely.
Can I add something?
Yes, absolutely.
The work of Kristen Neff, Kristen, last name Neff, Neff.
Mm-hmm.
She's a doctor, psychologist, I believe, who has done work on self-compassion.
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
She has a couple of excellent. She has a YouTube talk and a couple of other talks on YouTube, TED Talks rather, a TED Talk, and then some other lectures. And she also has a book on that's. I think the title is Self-Compassion, and it is really excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly, she really offers some very concrete information, perspectives, and tools on kind of how to sort of walk yourself through difficult moments in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot of love. It's applicable to anyone. And I have found it really, really helpful.
Oh, great. We have been participating and subscribing to some of the, there's a global network of therapists who are talking about innovative ways to help clients move forward through the struggles. And one of the latest topics in the last 6 months has been self-compassion in terms of helping people with anxiety and depression because it addresses the low self-esteem aspect. I didn't see that name come up, but I'll have to watch for that.
She's an expert in her field. I can, her I think her book would come up on Amazon, but I can message through the center what I'm referencing.
That would be great. If you just want, you can email us at members@anxietycenter.com. I see those emails as they come through, so you can do that. I think the other thing we're going to do too, as you probably noticed, we've changed a lot of the chapter information, and so we're going to be posting some of these YouTube videos from other people online to address some of the issues of anxiety. One of the reasons is because there's so much good information out there right now. The problem is that for content generation, it's just me. And of course, that takes a long time to get things done. So by posting some of the other better stuff, I think that can help our members move forward as well. So I appreciate the recommendation. I'll have to check that out.
Sure. I appreciate your website and all the resources.
Oh, our pleasure to help for sure. Okay. I wanted to thank again everyone for joining in the call. We will start doing some of these things that you recommend. I think we will have some of the therapists on for self-esteem and grieving and some of the other topics that we haven't had time to write about yet, just to get people moving in those directions. So again, I want to thank you so much. If you are a prayer, if you would pray for the recovery support members and those who are working on their recoveries, that would be great. there's a whole interest now in integrating the spiritual aspect into recovery. Some of the research we're seeing is actually quite phenomenal. We've seen it over the years too, for those who actually do take the time and pray about their recoveries and pray for others. So we want to incorporate more of that to give people a boost to get them back into life without anxiety issues, and then to help others too. So as a collective, we can help hopefully the global community grow and move beyond this anxiety and depression stuff that is so plaguing today. Certainly the younger generations are going to need a lot of help. They have a lot more challenges than the older generations had, so if you keep them in your prayers too. So again, thanks so much everyone. I wish everyone a great couple of weeks. We should be connecting again in 2 or 3 weeks for the next one, and I'll post who the guests are going to be and the topic is. So just encourage you to check that, and hopefully you can join us next time.
Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate it. It's been lovely to chat to you, as always, and look forward to next time. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Hope you all have a great couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you too, Jim.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Carol, too. Nice to hear from you again. God bless everyone.
God bless, Jim.
Bye-bye.